All right, well, hey guys, thank you very much for joining us. Good to have you here. We're going to launch straight into things. I'm imagining we'll have a few more people join us along the way. We want to do the right thing by you guys who showed up on time. So thanks for that. Hey, a couple of housekeeping things. So during the course of the talk tonight, if you've got any questions that come up for you about what I'm talking about or related things, even if they're not covered, just pop them in the chat function and we'll collate those. And at the end of the session, I'll do my best to answer as many of them as I can, those that I'm able. And those that we can't, we'll come back to you with a full response. So the talk's going to be about 40 minutes tonight. And then there's going to be about 15 minutes for questions at the end of that. One thing while talking about housekeeping type stuff, just so you know, we're recording the session and we're going to put it up on our website, but just for you guys and for people who you choose to share it with, we'll send you a link to it on essentially a hidden web page on our website. And we're also going to be sending you out a family pack with some resources, a copy of the nature passports that we've created for Karratha and Kununurra in partnership with your shires. Last little housekeeping thing, just to let you know, Nature Plays are not-for-profit. We're supported by the Department of Local Government, Sports and Cultural Industries. And this particular program, we've got some extra support from Lottery West, and we're very thankful to them for that. So guys, I'm going to bring up a presentation at this point, and I'm going to be speaking to that throughout. And just a reminder, any questions, pop them in the chat function, and at the end of the talk, we'll do our best to get to them. All right, just going to bring up my presentation. Bear with me. It's actually kind of amusing, isn't it, that we're here for a talk about screen time, and instead of meeting in person and being able to share this stuff with you, I'm having to do it via the wonders of Zoom. But these are the times we live in, and really sad I didn't get a chance. I was due to come up to Karratha and to Kununurra and was really looking forward to that, to hear from you guys and meet you guys and catch up with some of the officials, members of the council and government departments up there, and find out some of the issues that are really facing your area. So digital wellbeing, what's it about? So the key thing, guys, is from our perspective, and there's a broad body of work sort of building in this area, it's really around, rather than thinking about technology as this evil that you're trying to work out of your life, recognizing it as something that's part of modern life, and just figuring out ways to bring it into your family life that supports your health and happiness. Because it really can, or it can detract. So it's about getting that balance right. So that's the key thing to understand. In terms of that balance, we did a survey a couple of years ago through our Outdoor Classroom Day campaign. And I think it was about 3,000 parents from around the country. And we asked those parents how their children's time was being spent on an average week. And what they came back and told us was that they were spending about 25, 26 hours a week at school, so about 40% of their waking time. They were spending about 20 hours on screens for entertainment, about 31% of their time, and only about 6 hours in outdoor play. And only 55% of the respondents said their kids played outside every day. So we can see that there is a bit of imbalance going on for a lot of families. And almost to a person, the respondents told us that screen use was the #1 barrier that they were facing for their kids to get outside. So that's really what's led us to doing this session. So let's launch straight into it. So the first thing, and I think it's a given, we all know it, but screen time is changing really, really fast. And I'd suggest to you that some of the ways we talk about screen time and think about screen time is actually kind of caught up in about 2 decades ago. It's really thinking more about the sort of television type time when screen time and the rest of your life was really separate. So you had those moments where you sat in front of the television and you were doing your screen time, and then the rest of your life, it wasn't there. So clearly the way technology interacts with our lives has changed an awful lot, and we need to adapt our thinking to that. So just to give you a few little notes on how much we're seeing, how fast that change is. So just to bear in mind, YouTube was only launched in 2005, not that long ago. Facebook was launched to the public in 2006. The iPhone was launched in 2007. And look, I mean, that's only 14 years ago. That's a young teenager's lifespan that game-changing technology has been with us. So we're really living through this incredibly rapid period of change. In 2009, YouTube passed 1 billion users. So that's only 4 years after it launched, there's 1 billion people using it. That kind of rate of adoption is unlike anything that any generation of human being has ever seen. So it's no surprise that it's taking us some time to adjust and to figure out how to respond. In 2017, the average 5-year-old had 1,500 photos of themselves published to the internet, posted to the internet. So there's clearly a shift, and there is an impact from that being more of a public presence from a young age that we need to understand. A couple of other little facts I just thought I'd share with you. So this year we're looking at a situation where that iPhone that was launched back in 2007 is now processing 3.3 billion instructions a second. Now, you might have heard that your phone has got more computing power than the machines that put the first people on the moon. Well, that's also a really old bit of news. Now your charger has more, your smart charger has more processing power than those computers. And the other thing to remember is that, or to know, is that we now have 4.5 billion people around the planet on the internet, using the internet. And I think that's something that's really important to bear in mind, because if we think about the internet as a main street in a city, that main street is flooded. It's got 4.5 billion people crammed digitally into that space. So in that number of people, you're going to have the full gamut. You can have Nobel Peace Prize winners, you can have human traffickers and everything in between. So we really need to think about when we put that device in our children's hands that's processing 3.3 billion instructions a second, and through that device they have access to this main street. We need to be really careful about how we prepare them to be in that space. And I think it's really important that we don't separate out the digital world from the real world, in the sense that we would never let a young child be unaccompanied on a main street, let alone one with that kind of volume. So these are some of the things we need to bear in mind. Now, for us living in Australia and parenting in Australia, we've got it pretty good in lots and lots of ways. So there was a study that's done periodically, and it looks at 49 countries around the world, and it assesses them on a range of criteria and gives them scores, like, you know, like a score that your kid might get from their teacher, a grading. So in our scorecard from this study that involves departments, government health departments and universities from around the world, Australia gets an A- for community and the built environment. So what that means is we have good facilities. We have great schools, we have good sports facilities, we have good roads between those things, we have footpaths in our suburbs, we have the infrastructure. In that same study, we get a B for physical activity in schools. So our schools are doing a pretty good job of building in time and space for our kids to be active on a global scale compared to other countries. And we do pretty well in sport. In organised sport, we get a B- compared to other countries. So there are teams that you can join, there are coaches, there are facilities, schools are doing a good job. We're pretty well set up to be an active society and have active children despite this modern technological age that we're living in. But in that same study, there are some other findings that are a little less glowing for us here. So on active transport, compared to other countries, of the 49 in the study, we get a D- compared to the others. So despite having those facilities, we're not really making an active use of them. We're not walking or riding between our house and the footy field or between school and home. In terms of overall physical activity, our kids get a D-. So despite all of the benefits we have, we're actually a pretty sedentary population compared to other countries, which comes as a surprise, I think, for a lot of us, because we certainly think of ourselves as an active outdoor sort of nation, but it is shifting a bit, and it doesn't have to. We can bring it back. And when it comes to screen time, compared to those other countries, we're in the lower end of it. We get a D- as well. So that's just some of the context of raising a child in Australia to bear in mind. So back to digital wellbeing. So why does the idea of balancing out the technology in your lives matter so much? So the first thing to remember is it's just really powerful technology. It can impact how we think and how we do things in really significant ways. I think we all know that from our own lives. But I want to dig into some of the research quickly. I think I've got 4 or 5 slides. I'm going to move through them fairly quickly because I don't want to depress everyone, but I think it's worth being aware of what happens when we get the screen time balance a bit wrong. So, in terms of mental health, the research is showing us pretty clearly that excessive screen time is linked to high levels of depression and anxiety. And look, we know that we have a bit of an anxiety epidemic in our young people in Australia. 16% of our school-aged children have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, and that's going up, sadly. And we also know that kids who have an excessive use or a high use of screen time report lower quality of life. And maybe there's a bit of a chicken and an egg thing there. It's not entirely clear, but we know higher screen use, higher likelihood of anxiety and depression, and lower ranking of how they feel about their quality of life. On the flip side, we also know that by meeting the physical activity guidelines, we can counteract some of that because we know kids who are active have lower levels of depression. And we also know that there's lots of resources online and via technology to help us with our mental health. And we've got some links to some of those that we can share with you. In terms of physical health, so excessive screen time use has been linked to lower physical activity, lower fitness, strength, endurance, and flexibility. And there's a real impact on posture. And I've actually got a slide for you, which is a bit of a take home after this one, but we'll come to that in a moment. Again, on the positive side, because remember, technology is not the devil. Technology is a powerful tool at work in our lives and at work in our children's lives. So we can use that tool in whichever way we want. So on the positive side, active games, things like Wii Fit are clearly going to be better for kids' physical activity. And we're certainly seeing that in the research, that when those kinds of technologies are included, we get a bump up in kids' physical activity, which is what we want. And we've also had studies showing that some apps can help with mental dexterity, and there's certainly some apps out there that are good for learning. So just quickly on the posture. One take home, something to bear in mind, is that when your kid uses technology, there are very different ways it can impact on their physical health. So the first thing is sitting is a problem. We sit too much, all of us. And here I am sitting down and talking to you via technology, and you're probably sitting down. But in terms of physical health, sitting is a real issue. When children are on devices, they will often, their head and their shoulders will go down towards the device, and the device will go down towards their lap. And what you're getting is really negative posture in the neck and the back, and you're also crowding all those organs. And it's just irrespective of whether the technology is good or bad or indifferent, you don't want to be sitting like the young boy is sitting in the picture to the left. You can easily flip that if you make it a requirement for your kid. Okay, you want to play on your device, you have to do it lying on your belly. All of a sudden, we're promoting that good positive curve, the head's lifted, and weight's being carried on the arms a little bit. And what you'll find is that before too long, your kid will complain that their arms are getting tired. So A, they're building up a little bit of strength. B, they're getting a bit of positive coordination. And C, once they get tired, you can say, well, maybe it's time to get off the device. So that's just a really simple tip in terms of physical health, and really one to watch. If you're seeing your kid sitting in that slumped position, it really is a flag, a red flag, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have to rip the device away, but you really want to get onto that postural side of it. In terms of the impact on brain development, we've certainly seen in the literature, and guys, throughout these last few slides, you'll notice after some of the bullet points, there's numbers in brackets. We're going to be sending through to you a literature review, which just pulls out some key findings from the research literature around this. So those numbers there are references to different points in that document that we'll be sending through. So the research is telling us that excessive screen time has been linked to negative impacts on language use and acquisition and to executive function. So executive function is an interesting one. That's our ability to make a decision for ourselves and to follow through on that decision, like we might imagine a CEO would or an executive of some kind. One of the ways that kids are tested for executive function is that they're asked to stand still. And if the kid makes the decision that, okay, I'm going to follow that instruction, and they stand still, you then time how long they can maintain that pose. And what we're finding, and there's a lot of other measures of it, that's just a very simple one, but the literature is showing a steady decrease in children's executive function that matches the increase in technology. Now we can see in terms of the brain development, increased or excessive screen time can lead to reduced parent-child interaction. On the flip side, quality programming, quality content, including apps, can be beneficial. There's some really good learning apps out there. So this is a really important point. Not all technology is created equal, and certainly not all content is created equal. So just being on the screen is not the key marker. The key markers are they sitting? How's their posture? And what are they doing? These are some of the things that you want to be looking at. Here's another takeout, guys, and it relates to the brain development slide. This is a slide that's just capturing a bit of research that was actually highlighted in the Australian newspaper. It's going back a while now, in 2012, but it's still very, very relevant. So this was reporting on some research done in the US, looking at families' screen use and how that related to language, to spoken language. So what they did is they measured the amount of time families spent on screens, and then they measured the number of words they spoke collectively per day. And what they found in this particular study in the US was that in families where screens of any kind were on for sort of around the 2-hour mark, sort of a moderate level of usage, that the household would speak 6,000 words to each other in a day. So let's think there's maybe 4 of them in the house. They're speaking 1,500 words to each other a day. On the flip side, in families where screens were on whenever anyone was home, what they found was that language use shrunk down to 500 words a day. So when screens were on all the time, people were speaking 500 words only. Apologies. Just notice I had a note that don't have my screen in the proper setting. My goodness, apologies for that. There we go. Thank you, Nicole, in the background. Much appreciated. So this is very much a take home. When we're on our devices, and this is mum, dad, kid, auntie, uncle, it's not just what we're doing, it's what we're not doing. And I think we can all see very clearly that the amount of time we spend in conversation has a really significant impact in our child's development. That's our time to share with our children what it means to be a human being. It's a time to talk about what Johnny said at school, how they feel about their homework, whatever it might be. It's really important. So moving out of the depressing slides and into what do we do about it time. So again, remembering technology is powerful and making informed decisions for our families' health and happiness is really the key here. Okay, so the Australian Department of Health has some guidelines. So these are the recommended amounts of time that kids should be spending, or they shouldn't be spending any more than this amount of time on devices. So birth to 2, no time on electronic media, 3 to 5, less than an hour a day, and 5 to 12, no more than 2 hours a day. Now, I put it to you that there's really very few modern families who are meeting that. And, you know, it may well be that this is out of date. And certainly some countries around the world are starting to take a very different approach than trying to mandate a number of minutes or hours in a day that kids should be on screens. I was lucky enough to do a Churchill Fellowship a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I came across was in Iceland. They've changed their guidance. Their Department of Health has changed their guidance. And instead of mandating any amount of time, they're encouraging people to look at their children in a more holistic way and then work it backwards from there. And I'll explain what I mean by that a little bit more on the next slide. So the key thing that they're talking about, and that is starting to be looked at by researchers and government departments and NGOs around the world, and something certainly that Nature Play supports, is rather than being the policeman of your child's time on screens, be the mentor and teacher. So part of that is asking yourself some really fundamental questions. So instead of how many minutes are they on the screen, ask yourself questions like, is my child getting the sleep they need? Are they physically healthy? Are they engaged at school? Are they connecting with family and friends offline as well as online? Do they have a variety of interests? And when they're on the screens, are they using good quality content? Now, if the answer to all of those is yes, they're sleeping, they're healthy, they're engaged at school, they're meeting people offline, you don't need to panic yourself about the amount of time they're spending on the screen. You really don't. In fact, it may be more of a negative and create issues in the household and have negative impacts on your relationship with your child. So if all those things are looking good, if your kid happens to love Minecraft or whatever the game at the moment might be, that's not the end of the world. But if you're seeing some of those things and you're seeing some worrying signs, then it's time to look at screens in the big picture of everything else you're doing. So in terms of being a role model rather than a policeman, some key things. You want to be modeling positive technology use. So how do you use your screens, your devices? And you really want to be teaching your kids to navigate technology. And remember that Main Street idea. You've got 4.5 billion users of the internet in that main street. Your child will at some point be on that main street on their own. Even if you've got the best filters and you're super diligent, at some point, they're going to be on that street on their own. So part of your job as a parent in the modern world is to spend some time with your kid in that space and introduce them to it and teach them some of the strategies to be safe and that keep your ethics and your values from your normal life and carry them over into your online life. So that's a really important part Another part of being a role model is making sure that you're providing alternatives to screen time, fun, positive, other alternatives. If our role is really just trying to take technology away, we're always going to have a negative interaction with our child about it. If what we're doing is looking at other things to do, coming up with fun things to do together, fun things they can do with their friends, then you're replacing that negative screen time, which it can be, with something really positive. We also highly recommend, and a lot of NGOs and departments around the world are doing this now, we really recommend making a family media plan. And it doesn't have to be complicated, it's just around thinking through what you want and don't want in your technological life. And then at the end of all that, if you need to, there's some really amazing parental controls that you can put on to directly impact your children's use of the internet. But you kind of want that to be the last resort. Ideally, you're working through getting consensus with your kids, teaching them some agency and some strategies and some tools, and they're able to, with you, have a freer introduction into that world. And when I say free, that's not them on their own willy-nilly. That's them being guided as a human being into that space and shown how to behave in it, rather than just having all the doors slammed necessarily. So, at Nature Play, we really talk about a strategy of reduce, replace, and balance. Just for fun, we call it R&B. So if you're feeling like screen use has become an issue for your family, then these are the things you want to do. So the first thing, very simply, is you're going to try and reduce the amount of time you spend as a family on devices. Now that's going to be hard. There are strategies and tools that you can use to help with that, which we'll go into in a moment. But that's only the first step. That's not the end of it. It's not just about reduction. You also want to do some replacing. So what we mean by that is find some technology that's quality content or active content. So for the time when your kid is going to be on devices, have them be doing some really positive things. And there's some great outdoor apps. Nature Play's been involved in a few, but there are lots of others. And then there's active games, but there's also some really fantastic educational apps and websites out there. And the third thing, which is the one that's closest to our heart, and I think is the one that really makes all of this go from being a task to being something really quite wonderful, and that's balance. That's bringing in other things into your life, family outings, games with friends, going to the park, bringing that in to balance out the screen time. So that's reduce, replace, and balance. So in terms of reduce, a few things, and we're going to send you out a pack. It's going to have some more resources in it. The first thing is to watch for signs that your kid might be having excessive use. Next thing we talk about is making a family media plan. Then if you need to, control the devices. And another one, and this is a tough one, folks, and I'm right here with you. I assume you're probably in a similar boat, is thinking about parental screen time, because that's as much of an issue as kids' screen time. So some signs that your kid might be having too much technology in their life. So one thing to look for is tantrums when the device is taken away. And I'm not just talking here about they don't like it, they try and fight you on it a little bit. They say, no, I want it back. When your kid really tantrums when it's taken away, that's not a great sign. Another one to really look out for is if when your kid is upset, so maybe they've fallen over and hurt themselves, maybe they've had a bad day, if they call for their device to help pacify them when they're upset, again, that's not a good sign. It's showing that the device is taking a role in their lives bigger than it should. And you really want you to be, you or their siblings or a human being to be where they go for that calming pacification, for want of a better word, when they're upset. Poor sleep patterns are another one. You really want to watch for that. If kids are not sleeping well, screens could well be a part of that. Another, if you're seeing loss of interest in other activities, loss of interest in in-person play, or increased anxiety, those are signs you want to watch for. So just quickly on making a family immediate plan, just bear with me for a minute. Have a quick sip of coffee. So the whole idea here, and it really obviously it depends on the age of your kids, but as long as they're talking, bringing them in is really important. But the first thing is, as parents, as adults in the household, you want to talk through how you want technology to fit in your lives. You want to try and get on the same page with that before you bring the kids in. But then when you're ready, you want to bring the kids in and start a conversation with them. So concerns, hopes, and often it's an interesting thing. We hear back from a lot of people on this. But when you do this and you bring the kids are often stricter than you would imagine. They often come out and say, for example, that they want you to spend less time on your device when you come home from work. They want to do things like play board games. They want to do things like go out to the park. Now, it's not always going to be the case, but we see it more often than you'd expect. In your family media plan, you also want to focus on alternatives. So what are you going to do to replace and to balance this screen time that you're trying to reduce? So that's really important. And you want to set some rules as a team. And one of the ones that we really love is the setting up of sacred times. So rather than just thinking about time in terms of the time you're not allowed to, you're only allowed 60 minutes or 30 minutes or 20 minutes on the screen. What about the times that we want to pull aside for things that are really important to us? So those sacred times might be dinner time. So every night we're going to sit down together for dinner. Those sacred times for you might be going out into the bush. They might be whatever it is. Picking out those family activities and those family times that are really important to you and setting them up as a sacred time. And we're going to block those in and we're going to make sure those happen. When you've done all that, it's just a question of writing it down. What have we decided is important to us? What are our concerns and our hopes? How are we going to balance screen time? Do we have rules around how much time can we spend on devices, or do we have sacred times? Write it down, put it on the fridge, and be consistent. Of course, that's easier said than done, but that's the task, and that's something to engage with. Through all of that, if it doesn't work, or if for your particular parenting style and your particular situation, you want to jump straight ahead to this, of course you can, and you can start putting in some controls on screen devices. So there's some really good options out there now. For a long time, there was really limited options, but so Apple has an Apple Screen Time app. It's free on every Apple device. You can manage all of the devices, all the Apple devices in your household via a single point controlled by the parent. You can monitor usage, and you can determine for each device how much time can be spent on individual apps and sites. And there's also privacy restrictions that you put on there, content and privacy. But you can, for example, say, designate app, let's say it's TikTok. Johnny on device B can only be on TikTok between 5 and 6 and for a maximum of 30 minutes. You can set that in Apple Screen Time, and after that time, that app will fade out and the kid won't be able to access it. So it's a powerful tool for parents. You can also do some really good things with your Wi-Fi. First thing is you can turn it off if you want to. The almighty off button is always an option. But there's also some really good controls. You can program almost any modern router to come off and on at whatever times you want, multiple times a day. So if when you've gone through your conversation, your media plan, it's not working and you want to enforce the rules you've set, you can do it. And again, we're going to send you through some information, including some good options for some of the different kinds of internet connecting controls. Okay, so parent screen time. So modeling positive behaviour. A really important one though, I think, is to remember not to be the paparazzi. You know, don't turn your kid into Princess Di and be chasing after them, photographing them all the time. We love our kids. We want to capture those moments, and we want to share those moments with the important people in our lives and in our kids' lives. But it is important to keep it to a minimum. We don't want our kids to be experiencing the world via your phone. So you'll see it sometimes. Families have made an effort. They've gone out. They're at a stream. The kid's gone down to the water. They're making a little boat out of bark. And then the parent's right there with the phone, photographing them and saying, look at me, Johnny, quick, turn this way, turn that way. Photographs being taken and it's being sent out. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, of course, but we don't want too many of our kids' experiences to be interrupted or thought of in terms of how will this look to others. So we want them just to be able to sink into their own experiences and to not be thinking about being published. So that's an important one. Another really big takeout in terms of your own screen use, and it's a good one for your kids' devices if they have them also, is turning off the notifications. So if you go into the settings on your phone, there will be a whole range of notifications for different elements of your phone. So the classics are, if you get a text, you get a ping. If you get an email, you get a different noise. If you're talking to your kid and you're having a conversation, you're connecting, and your phone pings, your automatic response, because there's something about those noises, and they've been designed very specifically for this, they'll draw your attention and you'll pick it up and you'll look at it. And even if you turn it off and you don't respond to it, that's interrupting that moment with your child. So a really good idea, turn off the notifications. Have your interaction with those apps and those functions be at the time of your choosing. Don't let the phone tell you when you need to look at it and respond to it. In terms of the positives of parent screen time, really important to shoulder surf. Be there with your kids, engage in their technology, encourage them to be active, critical thinkers with technology. And a really good one to remember is that technology is designed to go fast. There's a whole bunch of quick decisions, rapid fire quick decisions that technology calls on us to make. Slow down. Teach your kid to slow down. When a device, an app, a website asks you for something, slow down. Think about it. Apply your normal values and ethics and strategies in regular life into that digital life. Okay, now the fun one, right? First of two fun ones. So replace. Lots of options out there. I'm not going to go through them, but lots of physical apps, lots of mentally active apps. I'm just going to check on time, make sure I'm not running over. Here's three just quickly that have been created in Western Australia. So Bright Tomorrows is a Telethon Kids Institute app. Really fantastic. It's for parents and for kids. Lots of ideas on how to manage the digital world and have positive interactions. Nature Passport is one that we've created with a partner in America. It's got about 200 outdoor activities on it. So basically the app just walks you through how to play various kinds of games and do various kinds of fun, physical, outdoor activities. So the app really disappears very quickly when you're doing the activity. Audio Play is another fantastic one, created by a couple of young Perth women, theatre actors, and they've come up with Audio Play. And what Audio Play is a series of audio stories that's broken up into different characters. And the kids on their device, they put their headphones on and they get assigned a character. And they play out the story in real life, listening to their part of the story and interacting with the other kids who are playing other parts in these stories. It's a really beautiful, highly engaging game. Kids are moving, they're interacting with each other, they're imagining, they're thinking, and created by Perth people, West Australians. Here's the really fun bit, it's the balance bit. Now look, I don't need to tell you how to have fun outdoors. You guys are country people, you know all about it. But some of the really key things is brainstorming together with your kids, thinking about what are the kinds of things you want to engage with. Because remember, if you're having good, active time outdoors together, independently at school, if your kid's getting all of that, you don't need to worry so much about the technology. You don't need to be the hall monitor or the policeman. You can be comfortable that if your kids has got all this good positive time, but the other stuff is all right. That's just their downtime. In terms of free play, guys, this is just such a fundamental part of every child's life, which it needs to be. There's so much research to show us that when kids are playing independently of adults, without rules, without instructions, that they learn how to socialise, they learn how to create and imagine. It reduces their feelings of isolation. It's just such a fundamental part of their lives. We also know that free play makes up a bigger portion of kids' physical activity than sport. So when kids are playing and mucking around, they get more of that and they're more active during it than they can with sport, because there's just only so many hours that we can have the coach and a referee there. But given a chance, kids can play for hours and hours on their own. And I've just got this slide up just to quickly say that it was really interesting during COVID, when we were, and our kids particularly, were really isolated inside. We were having to be in this lockdown situation. We were having a very technological life. The kids were doing their school remotely. They were spending more time on games. We could see this urge to be outside and this urge to be creative as an antidote. It was like the kids were self-medicating with play and the outdoors. And what we saw with kids out drawing on the sidewalks and out on their bikes with their parents. It was such a great example of the value of that as an antidote. Just in terms of sport, again, I'm sure I don't need to tell you guys about this, but if you're looking to balance your kids' screen time with sport, if you go to the Department of Local Government Sport and Cultural Industries website, they've got the Every Club Hub, and you can go on there and find any sport team in your area, and you can see where there's opportunities for your kids to participate. So particularly if you're new to town, you might not know where all the sporting events are happening. You might not know, Arnie Joe, who's running the campaign at the footy game. But through Every Club Hub, you can find those contacts to get involved in sport really simply. Just in terms of the balance part, we've created some passports for you guys. This one's from Kalgoorlie Boulder, but we've got one for Karratha and one for Kununurra as well. It's a hard copy document that's got ideas, and we've created these in partnership with the shires in your cities. Hard copy with lots of ideas of great outdoor things to do with your kid in your area. So we're going to post those out, and there's going to be more that we're going to be sharing through to the city of Karratha and of Kununurra to share with the population more widely. So really simply, to summarise it all, guys, this is from the World Health Organization. To grow up healthy, children need to sit less and play more. It's really that simple. The last thing, I've just got a few tips to leave with you. Generally, choose the tech life balance you are happy with. Don't be dictated to by devices. Remember that the online world is part of the real world. It's not a separate thing. And be a role model rather than a policeman. In terms of practical things, turn off the notifications on your device. It's a really good idea, really important for everyone in the house to switch off an hour before bed. And the reason for that is the blue light of our devices postpones our onset of sleep by 40 minutes. So if you're watching right up until the end, you're going to have 40 minutes before you're able to go into a full deep sleep, because that blue light messes with our circadian rhythms and interrupts our sleep. Rules around posture and devices is another good takeout, and something that I really highly recommend you watch for. That belly time for screens all the way into teenager years. And the final one is, remember those sacred times and focusing on fun alternatives. So guys, I've run through a lot of content. I would love if you guys have some questions questions for me, but I do understand that it's late and we're all got other things going on, but I'll just take some time now in case you've got any questions you want to shoot through. Anything you like, doesn't have to be anything profound. Looks like we've got none coming through. I'll give it another moment just in case. So just on the posture thing, guys, while we're waiting to see if anyone's got any questions directly, just a reminder that really what we're doing there is we're taking the focus off the device itself and thinking about the physiology of how the kid's sitting and how that's impacting on them. Now, sitting has been described as the new smoking. So it's one of the things that really has a negative impact on our health. We're all sitting a lot more than we used to. So when you see your kid sitting, whether they're on device or not, that's something we want to be aware of. If they're sitting in a way that's got that head down, shoulders crunched, organs crunched down, it's not only the sitting time that's becoming a negative, but that's going to be a negative for them beyond the sitting time. So lying on the belly, arching back, is a really positive, simple thing that you can do. So guys, we're going to provide the slides to you as well via email. I'll just PDF them and send them through, and you'll be getting the pack in the mail. So thanks again. I'm going to sign off. Have a wonderful evening, and I hope that was of some help. Cheers.